Today, we're diving into a source that makes a really startling claim that China's big dream of becoming a data superpower isn't just hitting a few bumps. No. It argues the whole system is basically a house of cards, that it's rotten from the inside out and teetering on the edge of a total collapse. Let's unpack how it gets there. Okay, so this whole story really kicks off with a wild rumor that's been flying around online. We're talking about a digital disaster of, well, truly epic proportions. You might have even seen the headlines yourself. A massive 10-petabyte data leak from a major Chinese data center. I mean, that sounds like the digital apocalypse, doesn't it? But here's the thing. According to our source, that story is almost certainly fake. And what's so cool about this is how the source just does the math. A 10-petabyte leak is 10,000 terabytes, okay? So even if you had a crazy fast 1 gigabyte per second connection, which you probably wouldn't, it would still take almost 4 months of nonstop downloading. 4 months. I mean, think about that. And look at the storage. You need to go out and buy 5,000 2-terabyte hard drives just to hold it all. Right. The source puts it perfectly. This isn't data theft. It's like you're helping the data center move house. It's just not technically plausible. So that giant headline-grabbing leak is probably fiction. But here's the real twist. The source argues that this rumor is actually a distraction from a much bigger and honestly a far more chaotic truth, that the actual state of China's data security is a complete systemic disaster.
So if it's such a mess, what was the plan in the first place? You know, what was this grand data empire supposed to look like?
All right, let's trace this back. The source really marks the beginning in 2019. That's when China officially called data the fifth production element, putting it on the same level as things like land and labor. And the goal? Well, it was to find a new way to make money, to replace the old model of local governments selling off land to fund themselves.
Right, so they wanted to create a kind of cyberland to plug those exact same budget holes.
Exactly. And then in 2021, you have the crackdown on the ride-hailing app Didi. This set a huge precedent that all data, no matter who collects it, belongs to the state in the end. And this all leads to 2023, with the creation of the National Data Bureau, a top-down agency to centralize all control. And this slide just lays out the business model so clearly. Essentially, the state bundles up all of its citizens' public data, we're talking household info, travel records, medical files, and then it hands it over to state-owned companies.
And then those companies turn around and use that data as an asset to get loans and investments on the financial markets. They're basically borrowing against the value of your information.
So here's the bottom line. The state gets the money it needs to fill its budget, while 1.4 billion citizens are left with all the risks. The surveillance, the potential for misuse. It's a classic case of privatizing the profits while socializing the risk. Okay, so you have this huge, centralized plan to turn personal data into cash for the state. But then the source asks a really simple but really important question. Who's actually in charge of building and protecting this whole thing? And the answer, according to the source, is pretty terrifying. The system is allegedly run by a deeply corrupt group of technocrats. The source brings up names like the chief designer of the J-20 stealth fighter, the chairman and GM of China's aerospace giant, even the guy who built their first 2 aircraft carriers. All of them reportedly investigated or even jailed for corruption. And these are the very people who have the keys to the kingdom, the nation's most sensitive military and tech data. And this alleged rot, it doesn't just stop at the military-industrial complex. The source claims it goes way deeper, right into the heart of academia, the one place that should be the gold standard for data integrity. I mean, the numbers on this slide are just mind-blowing. In 2023 alone, over 10,000 academic papers were retracted worldwide, and apparently Chinese scholars made up the overwhelming majority. Over a third of all Chinese cancer research papers were flagged as looking like they came from paper mills. It gets even weirder. The source talks about researchers who apparently made up 7 non-existent ghost cell lines, which were then cited in hundreds of other real papers. This isn't just a couple of bad actors. The source is calling this an industrialized fraud machine. So, let's piece this together. You've got this huge, centralized data system. It's run by what the source calls a corrupt elite, and it's built on a foundation of data that is polluted and fraudulent. It really sounds like a recipe for disaster. And according to the source, disaster is exactly what we got. It points to a real-world data leak nicknamed the MLC leak. The number of citizen records that were exposed,
An absolutely staggering 8.73 billion. And this is the most unbelievable part of the whole thing. This colossal failure wasn't because of some brilliant state-sponsored hacker. According to the source, it was just a shockingly basic mistake. A database port was left completely open to the internet with no password needed to get in. So what do you think all that data on nearly 1.5 billion people is worth? Well, the entire 8.73 billion record database was reportedly being sold on the black market for just $20. That's it, the price of lunch. And the source argues this isn't just a one-off thing. Take another example, the Ansun or eSoon leak. This was a state-backed hacking firm, right? Top secret clearance, the whole deal. But their own internal chats got leaked and they told a totally different story.
Right. They allegedly showed employees making super low pay, gambling during work hours, just generally not caring. And the leak itself? Probably just a disgruntled employee. So the source makes this critical point. The system is compromised at the top and at the bottom. You've got a corrupt elite managing it and an underpaid, unmotivated workforce guarding it.
Okay, so you have this toxic mix of systemic corruption and catastrophic incompetence. Where does it all lead? Well, according to this source, it all combines to create what it calls a death sentence for China's ambitions in artificial intelligence.
The source really breaks this down into 3 deadly curses that it says are crippling China's AI development before it even gets started. The first one, it's called data pollution.
Yeah, we just saw the claims of widespread academic fraud. So when your core data is supposed to be authoritative, but it's actually fake, you're basically feeding poison to your AI models from day one. You know the saying, garbage in, garbage out.
And that poison leads straight to the second curse, strategic dependence. Because their own data is so polluted, Chinese AI companies are apparently forced to just scrape data from Western models. The source calls it knowledge distillation, and it basically means they're always playing catch-up, never able to make their own real breakthroughs.
And then there's the third curse, which the source says is the most powerful one of all, censorship collapse. The entire digital ecosystem is built around the Great Firewall and ideological control. So what happens when you train an AI model on its own censored, filtered output over and over again? You get a vicious cycle of decay.
And that feedback loop actually has a name. It's called model collapse. It's a real phenomenon where an AI trained on its own synthetic data just gets progressively dumber. It starts to forget how the real world works, it loses all creativity, and it just sort of degenerates into this bland, useless state. The source has a great phrase for it, ideological inbreeding, and it says that can only ever lead to intellectual weakness. So when you put it all together, the corruption, the fraud, the incompetence, the censorship, the source reaches a really, really damning conclusion about China's entire data ecosystem. And this really captures that final verdict perfectly. The source uses this incredible metaphor, calling the whole system a 6-sided, no dead angle failure, meaning it's completely rotten from every possible angle, from the moment the data is created, to how it's regulated, all the way to how it's used in things like AI. And that really brings us to the final central question that the source leaves us with. Can a system that's built on total control, on corruption, and on censorship ever truly be a place where real innovation can flourish? The source seems to think the answer is no. What do you